Hola, people. This is Brian Courtney with Short Bus Debate Club. As usual, I got Darren Jalla here with me.
Hi.
And today we are going to talk about the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. Basically, this is a organization that, well, by hook or by crook, tells us what we can see and hear and controls basically television, telecommunications, which include the internet. And again, they say what we can and can't see. Now, supposedly it's against the law for them to dictate what a point of view would be, but I don't know if that's actually true or not. The reason that I want to talk about the FCC is because the airwaves that we're talking about, whether we're talking about the internet or television, are technically our airwaves, the taxpayer airwaves, which is why the FCC has control over them. And I've got a serious problem with the fact that the NFL sells the rights to broadcast their games to the highest bidder. And that isn't the problem that I have. The problem that I have is that, they sell it through, I think, 2023, 2025, and the deal is worth $100 billion. Well, since those are our airwaves and our legislators are always saying we don't have enough money for this and we don't have enough money for that, and our infrastructure is bad and education needs help and all of this stuff, then when $100 billion is passed to transmit a game over our airwaves, why don't we get a piece of that? I mean, the FCC makes a ton of money in licensing and everything else, but again, those are our airwaves. So why couldn't we get a chunk of it to give to some schools and to fix bridges and roads? I mean, we definitely need the money. And I think we need it maybe more than the NFL. But that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today.
So their rhetorical disposition is that they're selling it because it's their product.
Well, yes. So the NFL, it is their product. Absolutely. But if they didn't have our airwaves, then there wouldn't be a fucking product. Or everybody would be watching at the stadiums. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't transmit the games. I'm saying that it's $100 billion that we're talking about, and it's being transmitted on our stuff.
Well, and you're suggesting that the concept of ownership is more complicated than the product that's being produced. It's the medium through which the product is being transmitted through. Like it's sort of like a commons like space. We'll say like the airways or something, like you said, that the airways are owned by the citizens. It's like or should be managed by the government, but still be owned by the citizens.
Right.
Whereas right now, the way that the system functions is, while that might be rhetorically what it is suggested, like you said, the only thing that we make money out of is in the licensing of those spaces. It's not in.
Well, and the fines, because they do fine the hell out of everybody.
Okay. Yeah. The Howard Stern rule, right?
Right. They fine everybody a lot of money. But yeah, okay, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're not our airwaves.
No, I don't know. I'm just like at the bottom of your argument. I just want to see, because I'm always going to be on the side of the medium belonging to the people. I mean, I think that, if it were up to me, Facebook should be a public commons. Instagram should be a public commons. All of these spaces that are supposed to be there for communication, that should be public commons. And that does not mean that I'm not saying that Mark Zuckerberg shouldn't be able to make some money off of it, but I'm fairly fucking certain that he doesn't need to be the head of $1 trillion industry when the vast majority of what he's creating is a space that's being produced by the people that are creating the network for that to exist in the first place. He produces the software that allows it to happen, but we're the ones that reproduce stuff.
And see, maybe that's where it gets tricky. Like, so in telecom, I know that MCI spent a lot of money through the ages, and historically they laid all of their lines next to railroad tracks. So they had more lines run than any other telecom company out there at one time. And of course, MCI is no more. But, so they spent their own money to run that line. But yet the FCC still had domain over it and what they could use the line for. I'm sure when NBC first started their broadcast, they put lines up. But I know that the government, to some degree, has dominion over where those lines can go and where they are. So I guess maybe the question is, just because you own the hardware, does that mean you own the entire network? And if you do own the entire network, then why the fuck does the FCC even exist?
That actually exactly was what I was going to circle back to at that point. If it's just something that the market's supposed to exist, there's a reason why you're regulating communications in the first place.
Right.
Presumably. I mean, it's a guarantee. I mean, in a perfect world, I don't trust anyone or anything, but to make sure that there's free space for people to communicate. So what is the modus operandi behind the history of the FCC in the first place in relation to that then?
Well, that's a really good question. And I'm trying to figure out, because I've always worked under the assumption that they were our airwaves, kind of similar to what they do in Canada, what they do in Great Britain. It's the BBC. And there's BBC Two and
Which
BBC Four,
and public broadcast,
and those are their airwaves. Canada does something very similar.
RT is Russian. Yeah, it's similar all over the place.
So I just worked under the assumption that these were really our airwaves, and the FCC was making money on the licensing of it. Yet the corporations were making the lion's share of the money by selling the rights to the NFL, the NHL, the MLB, you name it.
This is a really complicated question. Over the course of the last, when you and I were going to school as kids, when we were playing Oregon Trail, that was what computers existed as, right? I mean, we watched War Games, and Matthew Broderick did his hacking through dial-up, right? I mean,
yeah.
the ways in which the world has changed in relation to communications is so. I mean, one of our mutual friends, she goes through this exercise. She does these weird interviews with people, and she tries to get them relaxed. So she has this series of questions that she'll ask them. One of the questions she'll ask him is, if you could have it's an odd question, but it gets into that person's psyche. If there's a part of history or life that's not being paid attention to, if you could have a museum that was devoted to that thing, what would it be? So, when she told me that she did that when she went through her questioning, I reversed the roles on her. I was like, so what would be a museum? And she said, I would do a museum on technological development, particularly that relates to telecommunications, because everything has changed so much over the course of the last. We've literally gone from, I explain a pager to my daughter, and she can see it on New Jack City, but Like that shit doesn't make any sense in reality anymore. Nobody's got a brick, any longer. I mean, shit has changed so much when it comes to
There aren't
telecommunications.
payphones anymore. I don't think anybody knows what a pager is.
I actually took a picture of a payphone 3 days ago.
Yeah?
Yeah, because fuck, I hadn't seen a payphone in so long. I was like, shit, I got to take a picture of this.
So it says the commission is the United States primary authority for communications law, regulation, and technological innovation. And it says that basically they handle radio, television, wire, satellite, and cable in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. So, again, just reading that and none of the legalese or bullshit that's going to be associated with it somewhere down the road, that makes me think that those are our things. And I would guess, maybe not at the beginning with NBC doing their thing, but I would guess that there are either tax breaks or subsidies for these companies that are laying the line, whether, it's fiber or the wires that used to go from telephone pole to telephone pole. I'm guessing that there was a subsidy involved, because otherwise, why wouldn't you just tell the FCC to fuck off? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So,
well, but if you want, regulation exists, though. I mean, you can't just tell, if you want to be a part of an industry, you can't just tell the regulatory commission that's in charge of that industry just to fuck off. I mean, I guess you could.
Right, but what I'm saying is, who the fuck put them in charge? Like, why did they become an organization to begin with? And I think that censorship and making sure that we're watching what they want us to watch is part of it. I think that the NFL is one of the opiates for the masses. I mean, it might be the opiate for the masses for a different demographic, and then Facebook is one and TikTok is one, and but all of those things I just mentioned still have to answer to the FCC.
Well, I mean, because they communication is a social function that allows them a society to exist. So when, just as a for instance, at the beginning of the country, when Ben Franklin was the Postmaster General, he helped to institute the foundation of something like Media Mail, and also helped to include the movement of journals and newspapers through the mail, because of course he was tied to printing presses, and everybody wants to look at all those people at the beginning as if they're altruistic, but he was making some money too. But part of the reason why they wanted to he did have a measure of altruism in what it was that he was doing, because of the value of making sure that people could read, because of the connection of reading to communication, and to facilitate the movement of those concepts so that people can actually engage in dialogue with one another. I mean, I'm certain there wasn't an FCC back then, but you can see the foundation of the significance of communication during those time periods. And as things like what's the Wire, the
TV show on HBO?
No. I'm talking about it's an older form of communication. It was through
the telegraph.
Telegraph, yeah. So you have the telegraph, you have the telephone, you have all through. I mean, as that speed of the movement of ideas continued to go faster, I mean, it's on the telegraph on the side, if you have a horse race that's running here, I mean, you can send that information forward and they could still have bets open. You can have a pass post position. I mean, there are certain things with regard to that communication where there's criminal positions that you'd have to consider. And then there are also just to make sure that you're facilitating a space, because communication is a public good. It's something that we have to engage in socially if we're going to pretend to have a democracy,
No, I understand that. I'm still mulling over, and now, I'm thinking, okay, so first they used smoke signals, and then there were the dudes that were riding the horses back and forth, and I think that was Western Union. And then Western Union started the telegraph, so they didn't need the guys with the horses anymore. And then Alexander Graham Bell stole the telephone idea.
And the Pony Express, motherfucker. Come on.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe it was the Pony Express that I was thinking of, and then Western Union did the telegraph. I knew they were back there somewhere. But I still... Like, I understand doing business, there's some sort of authority that's going to tell you what you can and can't do. But if it had never been there to begin with, like, some of the newer technologies that came out that nobody had ever dealt with before were like Instagram, Snapchat. How do those fall in? And again, because something like that is going to travel over multiple lines in order to get from point A to point B. And so in theory, it's jumping over a lot of different corporations' hardware before it reaches its destination. So obviously, those people aren't getting paid for every packet that goes over their line. So it makes me ask the question again, who owns the airwaves? Because the hardware generates the airwaves, but the FCC dictates what goes on them. I don't know. Fuck, maybe we don't own them. Maybe this entire show was based on a fucking false premise, and I have just fucked the pooch.
I don't think that you should roll back that position yet. I mean, again, because communication is just because somebody created the hardware or the capabilities through the technology, that doesn't skirt the social good side of the thing itself. Like, because it's when you're talking about communicating, it's not just the medium. It's what's being presented, right? I mean, like for instance, part of the reason why they didn't want to have these big media conglomerates in the first place was because there was this whole like romantic notion about like
competitive landscape.
Yeah. Well, and marketplace of ideas, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And as these spaces started to get bought up, when it starts with Time Warner and Clear Channel, and then it really starts to come into, through Viacom and all the different. I mean, just getting, what's the Australian guy, the Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah.
And it's just less and less on more and more of an entire system. If the space for thought gets withered away to the point where it's not, then the social quality of the thing itself, then it does just become the hardware. But you cannot have a functioning society if it gets reduced to that thing. Like, you have to have, I hate the term marketplace of ideas, but at least a diversity of thought to where people are communicating and having different thoughts, different opinions, and engaging one another.
Well, no, and I think that that's one of the reasons technology has advanced the way that it has, is because of whatever, marketplace of ideas. Mm-hmm. Either that or some conspiracy theorist would argue that aliens have been giving us technology, and that's why we've gone so far so fast. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily subscribe to either. But... So
is it a little bit of them then, or what?
No, I said I don't necessarily subscribe to either, so I'm not sure. I don't really believe in the alien thing. and I'm not positive I believe in the marketplace of ideas thing. Because when we start talking about technology, then we're getting into other weird shit where we're talking about billions and billions of dollars. You know, you get this fucking in technology, you call it a unicorn. So you get this unicorn idea, and all of a sudden, venture capitalists are throwing billions of dollars at you. And you might have a shit fucking idea that doesn't do anything at all, but they're still throwing billions at you because they think it's the next best thing. But I don't know if our technology from getting things to point A to point B, and it has progressed, but I don't think it's progressed at the same rate as the other stuff that we're talking about. So if you've got a network, right, we'll call that the hardware, or in some cases it's software, but that's the network.
The logistical capabilities to do what you're...
And then all of this other shit attaches onto it, right? So you've got an app for Facebook, you've got a cell phone, you've got a PC, you've got all of this stuff that is just attaching onto the network to possibly assist with communications, right? A television, in the old days, a telephone, all of this stuff is attaching to the network. But the network itself, without that, we couldn't have all of those other things. But within the network itself, and again, the technology has progressed. I mean, you know, we went from dial-up to DSL to now we're on fiber. I mean, you can get, not everybody, not me, I can't get it. And not everyone can, but you can get gig speed internet at your house now. So that's definitely a huge leap, because now you're talking about being able to download a fucking entire movie in like 35 seconds. To be able to have 2 Xboxes, 5 TVs, a fridge, and a fucking stove all attached, and you'll never see any latency at all because it's that fucking fast, right? So the network itself has progressed. And then, of course, all of the other stuff that attach to it, I think probably has progressed more than the network itself, because it's easy to come up with that next new best thing. I mean, we went through several iterations of it. You know, we went from Facebook to Twitter, Twitter to Snapchat, or sorry, say Instagram, Instagram to Snapchat, Snapchat to TikTok. And now, you know, you've got people streaming somebody's live video of them showing you how to fucking shave their head or do makeup or whatever. I don't know what people watch on TikTok. I think the makeup thing is what she watches most. She also said that there was a fat girl showing her feet. I don't know. So apparently,
that's the next best thing.
No, that is. I agree entirely, because you know, now we can watch people put on their makeup or show their feet or whatever. But again, no, that's the app that is attaching to it. So I don't care about the app, but we need the airwaves for the app to work. And that's the network part. So now, you know, you talked about telecom and how, well, you kind of started down the road. So they broke up AT&T, and AT&T came up with to where there was AT&T, which is now sadly DirecTV, I think. And AT&T broke off, and there were the baby bells, right? So there was Mountain Bell, there was Pacific Bell, Illinois Bell, whatever, Southwestern Bell.
A lot of bells.
Bells. The government thought that they had too much control over telecom. There was no competition because basically all of these guys were doing the same things. There was Bell Labs. They were the ones helping with the technology and innovation. So they deregulated and broke up the baby bells, which is how Quest Communications came about, CenturyLink down in Louisiana. There were a bunch of them. Well, now there's a company called Lumen Technologies, and they bought CenturyLink, and CenturyLink had already bought up a bunch of the competitive local exchange carriers. Time Warner was owned by, there was a big government contractor up in Broomfield.
Not Level 3.
Level 3, okay. Yeah. So Level 3 bought Time Warner, but now all of these companies have merged, and they're under one roof called Lumen Communications. So I don't know if the government did it on purpose or not, but by saying we're deregulating, they've eliminated competition and created one huge fucking telephone company again.
And more than just a telephone company. I mean, Level 3, just as an example, owns a company called Professional Military Resources Incorporated. And of course, it made sense that they would buy that because they bought the company it made sense they buy it because they had all the satellite capabilities that you need to run a private military operation. But the private military company they bought out, they knew how to deal with logistics. They had Harvard connections because of the people that sat on the board were all people that were former military, former intelligence people. I had a friend whose dad was an ex-colonel who went and did some work in Somalia on behalf of the company that were training African Union troops. Make whatever ought to, ought not to, that there is. But when you look at communications companies like that, I don't even know. I mean, you want to talk about, I mean, Level 3 is almost a fucking state, like a nation state unto itself. I mean,
that was the hardest building I've ever had to get into.
Really? Huh.
It was rough.
That makes sense.
I mean, they had retina scans clear back in, I think it was 2009 when I went in there.
Huh.
And they made me do a retina scan, took a facial photo. I had to go through a man trap to get through.
When you see, so then if you see all this, I mean, you want to talk about, I mean, you asked the question of whether or not we own the airwaves. I mean, these motherfuckers don't give a fuck. I mean, like you said, they're controlling an empire of wealth and protecting.
Well, and now it's got to be even worse. And I don't know, CenturyLink owned a lot of stuff, and so did Quest, for that matter. Level 3 did too. But you talk about the military connections, and who knows what else they owned, at the time that this merger happened. But it's a huge fucking company now. I mean, I want to see if I can figure out who does what.
It's not a company. It's an individual.
Yeah, it's a person. It is a person. So Lumen brings together the talent and experience, infrastructure, and capabilities of CenturyLink, Level 3, and 25 other technology companies to create a new kind of company, one designed to address the dynamic data and application needs of the fourth industrial revolution. So that's a total of 27 companies. So they really did create just one big fucking telephone company again, one communications company that has their fingers in every fucking bowl. And do you think that the FCC is really telling these people what to do?
No, I mean, when I don't see, when I see something like that acting, particularly and of course, I have an incredible bias, but if they're functioning on behalf of private military positions, private military contracts come from state actors, right? So, where does the state end and the corporation begin? Where does the corporation end and the state begin? I'm not certain anymore that, particularly as these spaces that, like the military was something that generally, I mean, if you look at it from like Max Weber, the idea of military power being used, being wielded by the state, that's the only legitimate space that it's supposed to function out of. It's not supposed to function out of these private spaces. I mean, the legitimate use of authority, the legitimate use of military is supposed to be wielded by the state. And that's generally speaking, at least inside of a lot of academic circles, but something that people have generally speaking sort of accepted as, I won't say axiom, but sort of like a truism. But when you start to see level 3, what's the company? What did you say? Lumen functioning, doing these things that were historically state functions. I mean, like the FCC. Where does the FCC begin and Lumen end? I mean, and of course you'd have to take a deep, long look at that. And I don't have any evidence or figures on it, but I don't know. These are the kind of things that make me a little jittery.
So I was just looking up news to see if I could figure out what the other 25 companies were off of their website, but they just got a $137 million contract to update Customs and Border Patrol Border Patrol. Their telecom. They yeah. So I mean,
they're being contracted by the state to do that.
Right. So they are definitely a huge company, and I don't see where the FCC did anything except approve it and
do exactly
cut their licenses.
Do exactly the opposite of what their intentions were. There is no competition anymore. You have seen an absolute consolidation of power.
Right.
Very nearly absolute, if not absolute.
That's a problem. So then again, I've got to ask, what good does the fucking FCC even do? Is it one of those like a limb that is useless and just needs to be cut off?
Well, I mean, maybe
we have a lot of those.
Maybe it's just like, voting. It's one of those things that we put in a certain spot to make a person think that they're actually there for the public good. We don't even know what the fucking public good is anymore. We don't even know what the public is anymore. I mean, the public is just a bunch of fucking consumers. I mean, citizenship, I don't even know what the fuck citizenship is. Just voting, just writing letters. I actually, after we talked about letters, just quick tangent, I found a letter that I wrote to Tom Tancredo about East Timor in like 97, and I dogged on him, and he actually, I'm sure it wasn't him. I'm sure it was one of his aides, but it was not a cookie cutter response. But of course, Tom Tancredo was like, he didn't like all the military venturism. He wanted the United States to be like a strong, just nation state that wasn't doing all these activities. So, but it was actually a response. It was kind of hilarious. So, but again, it's just like the FCC. It's just probably one of those limbs that Tom Tancredo is just like the FCC. Probably one of those limbs that we need to cut off. Metaphorically.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'd have to look at their budget to see, how much money they actually make from licensing. I'm guessing that it's a lot, because just looking at their organizational chart, they have several different bureaus available that run different stuff. And then they have a lot of offices, and strangely enough, most of the offices are attorneys. They've got an entire office of law judges. They've got general counsel, the inspector general.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So
these are new Roman times, to be sure.
Wow. So I don't know. I've been searching the internet. I don't even see how long we've talked. Yeah. So we've been on about 35 minutes now. Maybe this is going to be a shorter episode, because I kind of went a different way than I had anticipated when I hit record. Or maybe I should start scripting myself. I don't know.
I like where we end up sometimes. I don't think that you should overthink it.
Yeah. I think what I said should provoke enough thought to, make our listeners think about how valuable the information they're getting actually is, and maybe seek second, third, and fourth opinions before they start quoting a news report.
I don't think it's unreasonable I mean, the original point that you brought up about ownership of that space, I don't think that's an unreasonable question either. I do think it's valuable to understand that these spaces that are mediums of communication they should be the people's, they should be things that the people benefit from. I don't think it's unreasonable you know, for the NFL to pay a little bit greater tax, or any of those spaces to, if you're going to use these things. These are social spaces. These are, I would argue that they're commons. They're spaces that belong to citizens. So I don't think that that's totally out of bounds at all.
Well, and at least with regard to the internet, I mean, it may be something different now, but that communication was started within the government.
Yeah, it was in the military, and
Yeah.
the R&D was paid for by us. So it's something that we should benefit from. Google shouldn't just have a premium on it. I mean, look, I'm not saying they innovate. That's fine. You can make some money off of that. But this absolute negotiation position is fucking crazy. They shouldn't get that much. They don't need that much. Who the fuck needs that much?
No, is that so? Good old Roger can, get his $10 billion bonus because he signed a huge contract for $100 billion. I mean, seriously, we're talking about money that should be able to change the course of lives.
Yeah, human history.
Yeah.
All of our history. Like maybe start to deal with environmental questions or something like that.
Right.
Make sure that we have, real things that are gonna, so that my daughter, is gonna live to see 30.
There's lots of things we could put that money in, and that's why I mentioned the fact that our infrastructure is fucked. I mean, we've got bridges that are literally falling apart. I can't remember which city it was, but a huge chunk of fucking asphalt fell off and hit in the road below. And I think they put like tape and cones up around it. I don't know that they ever fixed it. But railroad trestles, I mean, there's lots of stuff that is need of repair.
Despite the fact that our civil engineering capabilities are, go to China, folks. I went to Chengdu, which is Western China, in 2016, and that's Sichuan is the province, and in the northern part of Sichuan, it's kind of like a Yellowstone kind of an area where they got all these like geysers, and, stinky bubbly shit. It's really pretty, right? But when you go from Chengdu to get up there, when you're climbing up through the elevation, you go through a bunch of tunnels, right? So like in Colorado, everybody's so proud of the Eisenhower Tunnel, the history of the Eisenhower Tunnel. I think that when we went to where we went to, we went through 13 tunnels that were as big as the Eisenhower Tunnel to get up to that area. That is a country, for all of its shortcomings, of which it has many. They're invested in infrastructure right now. They're putting their roads together. They're going to make sure that they're going to have something further down the road, so to speak. They're building these incredible bullet trains that are going from one side of the country to the other, that are actually going to go into other countries because it's supposed to interlink all of that part of Asia. So, these are we could.
We could definitely use
goods.
Some money.
Yeah, there are social goods that we could utilize those funds for.
So now all we've got to do is figure out who actually owns them, or talk them into saying that we do own them. And I'm pretty sure we do, but I need to go back and read more.
So we will.
So, but anyway, money thing aside, keep in mind that the FCC is supposedly monitoring all these huge corporations, Comcast, Lumen Technologies, Amazon, Google. So before parroting some news that you heard, make sure you double check it. Make sure that it is actually news and that they didn't leave a part out or change a number or whatever the case is.
Maybe funnel it to you because they're trying to project a certain set of interests that has nothing to do with you.
Right. So, well, that's all I've got to say. We can sit here and listen to Darren some more if he's got more.
No, I'm safe and I'm set.
All right, good deal. Remember, 720-334-ROLL.
Roll, bitches.
We're on Twitter at Shortbus Debate. I think you can catch us on TikTok at Shortbus Debate Club. And we will talk to you soon. Thanks.
Later.